Welcome back, everybody. It's the Brady Farkas Show right here on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. UVM men's hockey didn't play this past weekend because of COVID issues at Merrimack, but they are getting ready for the Hockey East tournament, which begins on Wednesday. Breaking it all down with us now is college hockey news expert Mike McMahon. Mike, how are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
Good. I appreciate you being with us. In addition to college hockey news, you also cover Merrimack maybe better than anybody. Tell us what went down at Merrimack last week that allowed, that made it impossible for UVM and Merrimack to play.
I actually don't know for sure. My guess is it was COVID protocol based, right? So they had some positive tests within their tier 1 personnel, I'm guessing. And then from there, as we've seen in other schools, either enough players had tested positive that they weren't able to play, or what more than likely happened, and I think this has been the case at most other schools, is 1 or 2 or 3 players test positive, and then 10 or 12 others are dinged through contact tracing, and it pulls out, half your roster. So that's my guess. I don't know for sure, but that's my guess. It's usually not a case of a number of players testing positive as much as maybe, a couple, but they're around in the locker room, they're around in their dorm rooms, they're around eating meals, and enough guys get dinged through contact tracing that it takes out a team.
Before we talk UVM, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Bob Emery, the longtime former Plattsburgh hockey coach who is on the staff at Merrimack now. Have you had a chance to interact with Bob at all?
I have. So it's been limited this year because of COVID, obviously. We've been kind of staying – I'm in a separate part of the arena. But, yeah, we were interacted a lot last year, and I think he's brought a lot to their staff. It's something that I know Scott Borek mentioned that he thought he needed – in that hockey ops role. Their hockey ops role is treated a little differently, I think, than some other schools. At most schools, sometimes, well, it all depends. Some schools will use it as kind of like a third coach. But Scott Borek really wanted to use it as somebody who had head coaching experience and somebody that could almost kind of be a co-head coach in a certain number of ways. And he certainly fits that bill for sure. I think he's done a lot.
Bob is the man. So if you haven't found this gem yet, maybe you have, but I implore you to go on YouTube and look at like the 1983 Boston College Super Bowl shuffle style video with him and Kevin Hool. I implore you to find them in the red and gold jumpsuits.
I have not, but I will do that today.
Oh, I will tweet it to you. So it is awesome. So we love Bob Emery up here in the Champlain Valley area. So let's move to UVM as we get ready for the Hockey East tournament. They are 1-9-2. The record is the record, but overall, what is the perception of what Todd Woodcroft is doing or trying to do at UVM?
I think it's been great so far. I mean, in the record will get there. The record's not where it's going to be in year 1. Look at Greg Carville's record, his first year at UMass. It wasn't very good either. There's a lot that you're going through and trying to reshape your roster and recruiting and just get your program to where you really need it to be. I know a couple of players who are at UVM. I talked to them over the course of the year. I know a couple of advisors who have players at UVM that I've talked to over the course of the year, and they could not say more positive things about the impact that Todd Woodcroft and the new coaching staff has had this year. From a teaching standpoint, from just a culture standpoint, all of them have absolutely unbelievable things to say. And I think you're going to see it's going to take some time, as it always does. UMass, I think, was helped a little bit by the fact that they had Kel McCarr waiting in the wings to come in, and not many teams have the 4th overall pick in the draft just waiting to come on board, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to take some time, but I think they're going to get there. I mean, it's an easy market, I think, to recruit from by the fact that you're so close to Quebec, you're so close to Canada. It's an awesome rink that's getting some work done to it, and it's a program that has some history behind it. So I do think with the right type of support institutionally, which it sounds like they have, they're going to do a lot of good things.
How much does his international coaching background help? Because he's been on the coaching roster for Sweden at the World Junior Championships, and UVM's already pulled in a couple of recruits from overseas. How big a deal is his coaching resume in terms of the overseas stuff?
I think it's big, especially as we see more and more Swedish and Finnish players make their way into college hockey. I think that's big. I really do, because there's something that they can kind of those players can emotionally attach to in the recruiting process. Todd Woodcroft might not be Swedish. I don't know if he speaks Swedish. He might, maybe a little bit or enough to communicate. I don't know. But I think there's going to be a level of comfort with some of those players, just knowing his background, knowing he's been around players like them before. And then the big attraction, honestly, that I don't think can be overlooked is the experience he's had at the NHL level, because every single one of these players that comes in to play college hockey, most of them, 99% of them, their goal is to play in the National Hockey League. So to have a guy that's coached at that level for a long time and been involved in organizations at that level for a long time, I think it's easy for players to look at his experience in the NHL and say, well, this guy knows what it's going to take to get there. He can help me get to that point. That really, I don't think it can be underestimated. That helps you attract premier college hockey players.
There's one thing that makes college hockey so unique to me. And I had Ross Colton on recently, who played for UVM and is now with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So in basketball, baseball, football, we think, okay, you go to college and then you get drafted after. A lot of these kids come into college hockey already having been drafted in some cases. So I'm always amazed at that balance a player might have between how am I building for the team or how am I being I could see a situation where, hey, man, I've already been drafted. Now it's all about me and honing my skills. I think it's a very interesting dynamic in college hockey.
Yeah. And hockey's a different sport too. Some guys are definitely very focused individually, but I think with hockey, sometimes it's a lot of that will get pushed aside with certain guys and it becomes for the betterment of the team. But just through the recruiting process, I think as you're recruiting kids, especially, younger kids that are drafted by the time they get into school, but not necessarily drafted by the time they get recruited, right? They're getting recruited at 15, 16, 17 years old. Before they're drafted, they get recruited first, drafted second, play their freshman year third. So the draft is almost kind of in the middle. Those kids are looking for, okay, I know I'm probably going to get drafted in 2 years. I'm kind of in that projection to get drafted in a couple of years. What can a program do to help me get there? And when you have, I think it's why the teams that have the most experience putting players in the NHL are the ones that continue to get that type of player, whether it's North Dakota or Boston College, programs like that, because they've got a history of, okay, these guys know how to get players to the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
There's a long, rich history of them doing it. There was a goalie in the transfer portal this year, Owen Savoroy, who ended up at UMass Lowell, had a really great career at RPI for 2 or 3 years and ended up at UMass Lowell out of the transfer portal. And I know from talking to a couple of people, one of the things that him and his advisors were talking about when they ultimately chose Lowell was what's their experience with getting goalies to the point that they're playing in the NHL. And you get Connor Hellebuck, and I believe there's several others, Tyler Wall, a lot of guys who have signed NHL deals after playing goaltender at UMass Lowell.
Yeah.
So there's a history there, and that was part of the reason why in the transfer portal he ultimately decided to go there. So it's big. I mean, if you're going to get big-time players that are going to play in the NHL, I think as a program you need to try to sell those players on how you're going to help them get there. That's big.
Let me ask you this, and I don't know the answer to this, but if UVM played a normal 30-game schedule, I don't know, maybe they go 7-23, and would it be more important to play those 30 games and not have a great record, or do you think there's been some benefit to all their stops and starts in terms of being able to, work more individually, or, Todd Woodcroft to get a better relationship with players? Is there any benefit to them so far only playing, 12 games?
I don't know. I'm sure there probably is. I think if you were to ask the players and you would ask the coaches, they'd all prefer to be playing as many as possible. I'm sure there is. It's hard to kind of find a benefit on the surface because it's hard to work on what you're working on in practice if you don't have the games to work on it, right? I mean, ultimately, that's what everybody's here for, is to play games. The practice is good. The practice is what you want in terms of developing, and I think it ultimately is you want to get on the ice and play games. One of the things that I do think it helps, especially with a new coaching staff, is the dead period from a recruiting standpoint. And it sounds silly to say it, but with nobody being able to travel to recruit, your new head coach, his new assistants, your whole new staff is on campus with your team 100% of the time. I think that goes a long way to building relationships with players, because normally, Todd Woodcroft maybe not have been on the road as much as a head coach, but those assistant coaches are going to be on the road recruiting a lot, especially for a new program. They're going to be on the road, I would guess, a lot. So you're just away from the group. You're away from the team that you have right now. So it becomes a little bit more difficult to, a little more difficult to build those relationships with guys if you're not there. One of the benefits, I think, to this type of season is the fact that your whole staff is around your whole team all of the time. And I think for a new staff, that does make a pretty big impact.
I'll get you out of here on this. UVM has had some interesting pieces this year. Dovar Tinling is the youngest player in college hockey. At least he started the year as the youngest player in college hockey. They've gotten some decent goalie play. Will Zapernick was a good transfer that they had in, I believe, from Alabama Huntsville, if I'm remembering that correctly. Is there anybody that individually that you're hearing about, people are talking about, with some optimism at UVM?
Well, I think they found out recently here down the stretch that they've got something with the goaltender, which is big. I mean, UVM, if you look back, UVM's always had good goaltenders. I was looking back the other day, and I think it's been I can't remember off the top of my head. I think I got to go back to like 2013 to find a year where they didn't have a goaltender with like at least a 9-10 save percentage. So they've always had good goaltending, and I think they found something down the stretch in the goaltending position, which is good, especially out of a freshman. So, again, you're going to be around for a while. That's definitely a good thing. That, to me, is where it starts. All the teams that have rebuilt themselves, it's all kind of started with the goaltender, whether it's even at UMass. I mean, Cale Makar got a lot of attention at UMass, and those guys that were putting up points, certainly, and rightfully so, got a lot of attention. But over the course of that run to the Frozen Four when they reached the national title game, they also had Philip Lindbergh emerge to the point where he had like a 940 save percentage. Like that helped too. It starts there. Any team that's kind of turned themselves around, I think it starts with the goaltending. That you hear coaches say it all the time. You build from the net out, and hopefully they found something there in the second half. And the second half of a shortened season, and it gives them something to build on moving forward. But I do think we're going to see steps. Next year may even still be a year where it requires them to build a little bit because they didn't have this first season together. But ultimately, I think they've got something. They've got something that's working as far as the goaltending position goes, and as far as just their defensive systems go. Defensively, I think they play fine. They just got to find a way to score more goals. I think right now, even going into the playoffs this week, they have to try to manufacture those goals. Moving forward, next year, the year after that, if the recruiting is working at a point where you bring in some guys that have some more skill, now you're not needing to manufacture as many goals because you have guys that can just go out there and score.
Mike McMahon, College Hockey News, college hockey expert, a great follow on social media as well. Just a really great wealth of knowledge. UVM, it's not official yet. It looks like they're going to play UMass Lowell in the opening round of the Hockey East playoffs. We could get an announcement either today or tomorrow on that. So, Mike, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for the time and the perspective as always. And I will be sending you that Bob Emery video. Trust me.
Sounds good. Thanks.